Hi, this video is intended to accompany the help resource for role permissions. So, permissions. Permissions are all over the place in IT systems. It may be that you're restricted on your PC to install software because an administrator has to do it, for example. Now, exactly the same kind of permission stuff occurs on websites, or at least half-decent websites. And the example we've given in this help resource is restricting certain people that work for an organization to have access to a forum. And this is a typical way this would have been done in the past. Typically, here's our organization object, which we've termed client, and underneath that, or as a child of it, you'd have your people. One of those people would be the client administrator. In fact, there might be several client administrators, so you might stick them all into a group called client administrators. And then you've built your forum and you want the client administrators to have access with permissions to that forum. So there we go. That's a typical permission scenario. And the problem is it's almost impossible to understand almost as soon as you've finished it. If you've got a memory as short as mine, within a week you won't remember what that client administrators group is about. And if you've got a life as long as mine, then you'll probably have many hundreds of groups called client administrators doing different things. So the naming convention is important. Don't call it client administrators, call it forum client administrators. And if you've got several forums, then it would be help support forum, feedback forum, client administrators, and so on and so on. But how bonkers is that? Because we have to package people into groups to give them permissions. What is this about? In the real world, if this guy is associated to this organization by, I don't know, let's call it client, let's spell it correctly, contact, and then anybody who's associated to this organization should have access to the forum with these permissions, then what's the point of that group and what's the point of that? Okay, so that saves us a little bit of stuff there, but more importantly it makes it comprehensible. So if I look at the client organization and somebody says to me, who is it that is the client contact for this organization, it's this guy here and as many other people as you would want connected to him as client contact. And then you say, okay, well, what are the permissions on this group? Well, anybody that's client contact of our organization can do this to it. Surely that's the logical way of setting up any kind of permissions control system, and that's role permissions. Okay, so how do we set role permissions up in XPOR? Well, to start off with, this thing here has to be described as what we call a permissions container. In other words, XPOR will understand that this thing can handle permissions. It'll become apparent as we go. So let's go and find that thing. Just opened up Modeler and found the client object. We'll open the object up. Now to have this thing understood, okay, he's an object which we know all about. To have it understood as a permissions control container, we tick the is permissions control container option there. Okay, so that's now explained this thing as a permissions control container. So just like a group, you could be in a group and the group could be given permissions over something. Any object type can be set like that as well, and we've just set that object type to be a permissions control container. So if this guy is in here, typically it would be parent-child, in other words he's contained inside that thing, then this permissions control container will give him these permissions on this thing when we connect it. Okay, but even more than that, even more intelligent than that, we don't want everything that's inside this permissions control container to have permissions. We only want the client contacts to have permissions. So we have to identify to XPOR that this association type here is what we call a role. So a role association. That's very simple to set up again. Let's just head off to the association types. I've already done these, as you can probably imagine. It's that association there. And very simply again, in the options we've set is role. So those options we just selected is role. So that now means that any contact, well, it doesn't yet because we haven't set the association up, but any contact that follows that role into this organization will have these permissions over the thing that, when we set the permissions up, over the thing that it's connected to using role permissions. So we understand that as a role and that as the permissions control container. Okay, so if we come back to Modeler and go back to our client thing, our client object, in the association model, we have set up that this thing has this association. Remember that we've just added that association. We've just added the association in to contact, and remember that this was a role. Okay, so we've already set him up, and we can make them. So let's go and have a wander across to the website and go and have a look at a forum. Which are stuck underneath this website in this group here. There's a whole bunch of these support forums actually. And we'll have a look at this one. Sorry, we'll have a look at this one. This is the forum that's inside it, inside that category. And have a look at the permissions on it. Okay, so we've set this role up here. Now how do we do that? Okay, so if we understand that from the model, from our client administrator contact, defined as, in fact it's just a contact, defined by his role as the client contact, to this permissions control container, the client object, we can now apply this lot as permissions onto that forum. And all we do is add, under the permissions tab, is add, instead of general public user group, we add role. And what we want to do, which I've already set up, but we'll walk through it again. Is anybody that's inside that client organization, or rather connected to that client association, by type client contact, it's already there actually, we'll have, and we'd set the permissions here, we'll have these permissions. Okay, so that was adding the role permissions to this support forum. Save, and away we go. Okay, so that's how we add role permissions to objects. I'll just repeat that. Now this individual who is associated by client contact to the client will have the permissions we gave to the object it was permitted to access. Okay.